Hello and welcome to another episode of Design Under Influence, where Willard and I are going to break down, mostly Willard, going to break down 10 steps for successful conversion from AutoCAD to ArchiCAD. And we are deep into this. We're like humped it last time. And so right now we're over the hump and we're into step number 6. Willard, step number 6 is
collaborative setup.
wonderful. Perfect. And so just to kind of cue this up for you, listeners out there and folks who watch the video, we're going to talk about roles and permissions, access management, communication channels, coordinating meetings, file sharing protocols, and we're going to touch on, maybe we'll spend some time on external teams and coordination with folks piping in and out of your system using newly flashy mint ArchiCAD installation you have. So, Mr. Willard, you're going to do most of the talking. I will do some prompting, but tell us a little bit about how your day is starting. And then without further ado, let's just kind of take a dive in number 6.
Yeah. So day is starting good. Fall is here. So that's pretty exciting time. And so, we're going to jump into collaborative setup. So
is your phone on silent? Sorry to take you off your track right away. I do that for people. Is your phone on silent? I mean, it's just yeah, we got, housekeeping,
phone's on silent. I think all the distractions have been muted.
Eliminated.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Let's
no. Well, I think, it's interesting what you said about getting over the hump. I think that this chapter of kind of migrating from AutoCAD to ArchiCAD is unique because this represents, in some ways, kind of the unique characteristics of ArchiCAD that set it apart from a lot of different other applications. So, I think there's a good saying that you can travel faster alone, but farther together. And I think that is kind of the theme with kind of collaboration within ArchiCAD, is that you might be able to figure out how to do everything by yourself. And with ArchiCAD, that's definitely something that's unique because it allows you to, harness both like some of the things that we talked about, like template generation, to make you a very efficient and productive kind of individual. But as with most things, this is a team kind of exercise in some cases, whether that team is in-house, you can see the people, or it's a kind of a global or national kind of team that you're working with. The tools or kind of the techniques with kind of collaboration within our ArchiCAD kind of set it apart from everything else. And so and we can jump into kind of the steps of understanding some of the features and way you're going to want to approach collaboration within this tool.
Yeah, I think we definitely are here for that reason, but I want to do a little bit of a show off. Can I show off a little bit? Can I show off just a little bit, and then we can go into it?
Yeah.
All right. What you said was technically correct. Actually correct in many ways, but I know this saying by heart. So, and I'm going to say it the way I read it. I understand it. I remember, and I internalize it. So if you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go together, which is essentially what you said. But I just wanted to show off and say, okay, this is kind of how I read this. And, it's worded out in a way that it's from times of past, it's from wisdom, of the past, because nobody speaks like that. Go together, but that's how the saying is, right? That's what you were going with that.
Yeah,
and it's so profound, actually, that if you stop and think about this, it's fascinating. But so what this does helps us travel far with our businesses, right?
Yep.
All righty. So show off's done. Now it's your show.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to do a little, before I jump into it, I'm going to give an example of how collaboration that I've seen. So I used to work for a firm, Orchid Winslow, out of Phoenix, Arizona, in the early or the late 2000s, I guess, or 2007 or something of that nature. But when I started there, they were one of the largest firms that was using ArchiCAD in the nation, probably even globally. They had, 80 or 100 seats of ArchiCAD.
Oh.
And to my understanding, when I got there, they had these individual seats, but they weren't yet necessarily using kind of the teamwork tool. And so teamwork is a separate kind of component to ArchiCAD. And so when I got there, and I had been using teamwork in a very kind of complicated manner, because at the time teamwork wasn't optimized for kind of web usage, and so you had to really you had to be using specific hardware to be able to make that tool work on a more global scale. But when I got to this firm, I introduced it, wanted to use it. And, within 6 months, the entire firm was leveraging this tool. And one example of the benefits of a kind of collaborative nature was that at the height of it, we were using teamwork to work on it was roughly, I think it was like a 200,000 square foot hospital addition. And so it was a new tower. And I forget if there was roughly about 15 different designers and architects working on the interior kind of floor plans. And then there was about a handful of architects and designers working on infrastructure and then also kind of the facade design. So we were able to work in a parallel method. So there was multiple teams working in the same file at the same time, doing different aspects of the design. And, the ability for us to work as a team collaboratively and on our own kind of scopes of work was greatly enhanced with ArchiCAD's kind of tool set. And so we were able to make changes, within a couple days that was, for a 200,000 square foot building that was super complex very quickly. So the design iterations were much shorter and much more accurate, and is a very unique tool that is unlike a lot of the tools that you would see in other applications. So that's just kind of a little historical piece and gives you kind of a basic idea of what teamwork is. But to kind of explain it a little bit, ArchiCAD's teamwork, which is, I think the actual name of it is called the Delta Server. And so what the Delta Server does is basically you create kind of an instance of this teamwork or the Delta server on a machine, and that can be in the cloud or on a server that's connected on a LAN, or it can be on your own personal machine, and then it can be, connected out into kind of a more global connection. And what that does is basically you do kind of an initial setup and you put your project file into this environment. And there's a little bit of a difference in terms of what we think happens versus what is actually happening. Mm-hmm. And we are working in this parametric model that's, a 3D based environment. And we kind of see things in that method. But when we upload it to this teamwork or the Delta server, it gets parsed into basically something like an SQL or like a spreadsheet. And so your file has just translated itself, even though the way that we like work with the file. It is that information, but when it goes onto this server, it just represents that information. And so it's kind of a reduction of the file's kind of complexity in some ways. And basically what that allows you to do is, instead of like working with complex three-dimensional data, you're working with the representation of complex three-dimensional data in a kind of a spreadsheet format. So this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but
I like that. I'm tracking with you on this one. Actually, I've never used it, but I'm actually, it actually is making sense, and I have many questions. But please continue. I don't want to interrupt.
yeah. So if you were to think of a cube would have, like in parametric standards, would have a surface material. It would have a dimensional material, so X, Y, and Z. It would have potentially other attributes associated with both the 3D and the 2D representation. And it might have other tags that are associated with it that can be pulled from other locations. But if you looked at it in a row of information, it would just be data, numbers and potentially references or other kind of pieces. But what you're looking at is not necessarily that three-dimensional representation, but it's a translation of that information.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that allows users to do who set up a teamwork kind of instance is that you can have multiple people all across the globe. And when they sign into a file, so if you have 5 people who sign into a teamwork file and you want, let's say, 2 of those people to work on a floor plan, they have the ability to reserve information. And when you reserve information, you're basically reserving that object in that row of data. And what that benefit does, instead of you looking or sharing information that, say, let's just say it's 1,000 kilobytes, instead of it being 1,000 kilobytes because it is a three-dimensional representation of that information, because it's just text, it's only as much text as is represented by the row of information. So if it has, let's just say, 25 characters that equal that value of data, then it's only sharing those 25 kilobytes of data across the internet. What that allows you to do is to work on super complex, super heavy files anywhere in the world with relatively low bandwidth. So, and just to do another example, I was when I was working in California it was actually in Santa Cruz. I was working on this huge house, and it was super complex, had a lot of data in the file itself. I set up a server on my desktop machine in my office, and then I went on a 3-week trip, and I brought my laptop and my iPhone 1 or whatever original iPhone was, and I was able to tether on a 3G, or even it might have been a 2G connection, through my laptop back to my desktop that was 300 miles away. And I was able to make changes, update the model, and do everything almost like completely off the grid kind of scenario. And the only way that I was able to do that was because I had shared the file, and there was basically a clone of that information on my laptop. And then when I made the changes to whatever objects I was changing, it was only sending the changes that were made in a textual format back to the server.
I have a quick question here. I need clarification here. Your laptop, when you do the work itself, it's still you're still working in parametric environment when you're making the changes to, let's say, said cube. Then it translates to that spreadsheet style, and then it sends it and syncs it. Or are you also working in a spreadsheet style format?
No, you never see the spreadsheet.
Ah, perfect. Okay, I wasn't connecting that. Okay, yeah, because it'd be
Yeah.
kind of hard for architect to just see everything flat and just change numbers. Oh, this one needs to be 6.2 feet.
Yep.
Like it's like okay, well, what does that change? I have another question. Maybe you'll answer it later, but I feel like I want to shoot it now. With this sort of collaboration, it like one thing comes to mind. If you move the wall, does a conduit move with it? Let's say you work on conduits, whatever, piping, whatever, plumbing, and I work on walls. If I move my wall a bit, what happens? How does that connect with the other team?
Not necessarily. I mean, if you were to reserve kind of all the elements that are associated with that wall, then it could move with it. But if you were only instructed or reserved the wall and there was pipes in the wall, then that pipe would have to be moved as well, potentially. It's not necessarily like pinned or like clipped to that set of information. But for the most part, a lot of the information would just have to be reserved as you're moving elements.
But is that like a real issue I'm describing, or this is just in my mind something that
No, it
might?
is. It is actually a issue that. So, for instance, in this teamwork kind of collaborative environment, one thing like teams that I've worked with are like structural engineers, and so if I'm adjusting walls and locations of different things that might be only in the architectural scope, the structural team would need to go back and make adjustments to their elements because there is a little bit of a division of labor, but then also roles and responsibilities. I don't necessarily want to be moving structural elements without the structural team's awareness, but then in general, I just don't want to move that because if I move it and then they don't catch that, it could show up later as like an issue because maybe they didn't do the load calculations based on the location of the new wall or the new column that may be moved because of something that I did. So in some ways, it's good that some of that information isn't hyper connected just because you want somebody to have a second eyes or the consultant that is responsible for that should be the one who's aware that their pipes are no longer in the wall, and maybe that changes some of their design.
Got you. So my other question is related to Delta server functionality versus native ArchiCAD functionality. Can you collaborate on a design without moving it to teams in Delta server? I mean, is that a function? Or
Well,
this is the only way to collab, like to have 4 or 5 people build the thing together?
yeah, this would be the only way if you were having people work inside of the file in a live file. This would be the only way to do that.
Gotcha. All right. This satisfies me for now.
Yeah, well, and then I think that brings up another interesting point is there has been times in a technique that I've used personally, even though I'm not working with people, I potentially will share the file on a teamwork file or on the Delta server, even though I'm not working with anybody, because so that I potentially could access that file from different locations. And there's also a component of it that creates automatic backups and different types of backups of information so that it just allows me to potentially just be a little bit more like, for instance, one thing that I often do is I'll be working on a desktop machine in my office. And then if I share the file in Teamwork, I can take my laptop and then I can connect to that file remotely and not have to worry about using like a VPN or some other kind of connectivity to connect back to the server location or having to bring like a copy of that file with me. Um, so there are some benefits even when you're working by yourself to using the teamwork feature.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's go into some of the details and touch on like roles and permissions. Like, where does that come in? You put that as one of the subtopics.
Yeah. Well, let's step back a little bit and just kind of go over kind of the basics of the teamwork. So teamwork is like a separate kind of install that you'll need to do and set up on your machine. And then there are a couple different techniques of setting it up. You can set it up on your, inside of your office. You could also set it up on something like a cloud-based server like AWS or Azure, or one of these other kind of locations where it's the install is done somewhere else, not necessarily on your LAN, but in a different location. And then there's like different setup kind of configurations. So you're going to go through and you're going to create like a global admin user. And then you're going to start to go through and set up the individual users and the roles and responsibilities for each of those users. And so this gets into a little bit more, and it's like a little bit closer related to like template, but then also, and one of the things I really appreciate about ArchiCAD is that even though we're working in this parametric environment, it's not segregated from our actual practice. So, it makes you think about how you are actually setting up your office, your projects, your teams. And so identifying the roles and responsibilities. So inside of the teamwork kind of environment, you're going to be, or the BIM server. I think I use teamwork and the BIM server, and really, I think teamwork is the older name and BIM server is kind of the new name. So excuse me if you're getting a little confused with kind of current terminology, but I always call it the teamwork. But one thing that is kind of unique is the ability to restrict access to the ability for people to make adjustments. And where this comes in is, it could be useful, especially if you have a very rigid kind of organizational structure and you're trying to limit the potential for team members to catastrophically mess up or adjust a file or get into areas inside the file that could pose, significant changes that would need to be remediated later. And so you can have roles like draftsman, project manager, architect, different other kind of components within that. And those will, adjust what people are able to manipulate within the application or kind of the environment itself. And so, yeah, that
I'm assuming there are some tumblers within the roles to further define a particular role, right? There's like different little things you can turn on, turn off for each role. So say you're a drafter, you can fine tune that access. Like,
yeah. And this is a good opportunity, especially for somebody who's creating the template and then somebody who's working on kind of the server side setup, is to understand, what you want people to be able to do and not do. And so, yeah, it is toggles or radio buttons to adjust like what people can do. And, one thing I have found is that it is a very powerful tool, but sometimes it can limit your team's capabilities, because if you ask somebody to do something, but their role is only set to, basically do floor plan work and not make details or create views or update drawings and things like that, you're going to have to go back into this server environment and make those changes. And that could be one thing that it's good, but it can get a little bit, you just have to be aware of it because it is a different environment, and you have to be able to know how to get into there and make the adjustments. And then you can create custom kind of user profiles and things like that for different team members. But it's a great way the way that I've used it in the past is if I'm working with teams that are overseas and I specifically do not want, potential manipulation of information, like adjusting sheets or something of that nature or layouts, then I lock that feature so that I'm not having to worry about somebody accidentally going in there and creating 500 sheets inside of a project. And if I only wanted support in one area, then I can focus the teams on that.
Yeah, got you. Are we ready to go to access management from here, or are there other things that you want to highlight in like the permissions and roles setup process?
Well, I think the roles and permissions is kind of also similar to what the access management, but yeah, we can go into access management. I think there's a couple different discussions that you can have is, who accesses it and how do they access it inside of your operation. Like if you're just doing architectural work and then you have specific team members or roles and responsibilities that you want to disseminate that work to, there's access requirements for that. So setting up their usernames and emails and permissions and things like that. It's all very straightforward once you kind of get into that environment. And one thing that I try to I don't think it's a super I don't think it's bad to kind of create a generic role and then assign the permissions and access as you go, or reduce it as you go so that you're not limiting the access capabilities as you're kind of getting started with this. And then there's also kind of a component that you can allow people to see different projects on the BIM server or in the teamwork environment, and reduce the visibility of certain projects or folders inside of that environment. And that's pretty good too, especially if you're working on multiple different projects with multiple different teams spread out all over the place, and you only want certain teams to be able to access, for instance, like the medical office team. You don't want them to necessarily work on the education side of things or see those projects. And then sometimes also it's nice to create kind of a sandbox or template files or things like that everybody can see and access. Sometimes I'll put like detail files or other information that I want to be globally accessible, but not necessarily projects that it should be only specifically accessible to certain departments or teams. And then, so that, it's something to dive into for sure in terms of understanding what you want accessible and then what information you want visible, as well as what you want the roles and responsibilities for each of your members to have.
Gotcha. We have about 8 minutes, so we have to step through stuff.
Okay.
All right. Like roles, I think responsibilities, I think that's key because that's security. That's, not doing double work, trying to fix other people's stuff, trying to go back and versioning, figure it out. That's I get that. So what's the next aspect of this team server that you want to talk about?
Well, I think it's really getting into what I think is the more unique aspect of how this could work for your organization. And I guess in some ways it's kind of a paradigm shift. So we're talking about access management, but really what we want our consultants in these files. We want our structural engineer, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing guys inside of these files. That's a whole different discussion. But say, for instance, you are working with a structural engineer who has ArchiCAD, or if you have a client who would like to have, potentially visibility inside of these applications or these files. So let's just talk about a couple things that I think are pretty interesting, and then we can relate that back to internal coordination and teamwork. So kind of in the access management pool of discussion, you can also create roles and responsibilities for consultants, structural engineers, MEP, and then there's the potential that you guys could be working collaboratively inside of the file. So not only your architecture team, but you have your entire consultants and everybody else is also working in that environment. If you're lucky enough to have a team that is leveraging the tool, and even if not, but there are ways to kind of work around that. But going further is now we are potentially integrating multiple different teams inside of this software. And then we also have our internal team. So there's a lot of benefits while you're working in teamwork is that you have the ability to communicate inside the application, inside of ArchiCAD to your other teammates. You're able to assign tasks to them. You're able to see where they're working. You're able to assign areas for them to work, give them notes. And so there's a lot of internal communication that can happen within the teamwork or the BIM server environment that allows a really kind of a hybrid approach to coordination internally as well as externally. And so what this also does is allows for meetings, coordination meetings and check-ins and issue tracking to happen in a method that you wouldn't be able to do in the linear approach where one person has the file open, closes it, and somebody else opens it. So there's probably, I would say, 10 unique benefits of working in this environment that allow you to track progress, to communicate more efficiently. So you're not using, some external communication source, emails or things like that. You're able to open up the project, see all the notifications, see if things got done, assign information, assign tasks. You're able to redline plots and insert them into the file and then assign those changes back to somebody who's inside that project. So there's not only kind of the sharing of one file working in the same place, but there's also now this synergy that happens with the ability to work in a parallel method with multiple different people with a rich, diverse kind of set of data that, in terms of human progress, this would be similar to, let's see, I still go back to kind of the like Google Docs or something of that nature. When you open up a document like that and you're sharing it with somebody else, and then multiple different people are writing or creating content inside of that file, you're able to both leverage the tool itself and all the inherent capabilities of it, but then you're also able to leverage kind of the group think or the hive mind kind of capabilities that, in human civilization, this is a very unique kind of place for us to be able to work on the same solution at the same time with multiple different people and also control kind of how that access is. I think it's a little bit different than Google Drive or Google Docs because you're not able to say, you're only working on page 2 and 5 and 7, and then assign those pages or assign that specific thing. So it gives you a little bit more nuance or granularity in terms of how and what you're allowing or wanting people to collaborate on. And then the communication is more streamlined and more project focused. So you're not communicating via email on a project saying, go look at sheet 5. You're inside the software and pulling somebody's view into something that you specifically want them to look at. So very unique kind of application. And I've always been strongly attracted to how Graphisoft and ArchiCAD have dealt with kind of the communication and collaboration aspect. And this literally, there's nothing else out there, probably in a lot of different softwares, that has this level of collaborative kind of capability as ArchiCAD does.
I have one comment and two questions, rapid fire. We have 2 minutes. I've you're the master of segues. I've never seen anyone go from so micro to such macro. Like you start with we're talking about tumblers on the user profiles, and then you go to human civilization, like in one breath. It's like, well, okay, profound, yes. But two quick rapid fire questions. I really want to know. Number one, very simple one. Real world scenario. You know how like software has lots of features and most people don't use most of it. But my question, in real world, do people actually use the meetings, the all the collaboration, the conversations inside the tool to have it all documented in one place and live with the project forever and ever? Does this actually happen, or do you see it somewhat happen? Or give me like a quick idea of the real world use case for this.
Yes, it does actually happen. I would say that teams that are using Teamwork or the BIM server are using this. Yes.
Okay. So they're using all the features inside tracking communications, meetings, clash detection, whatever, documenting all those, signing tasks, all that.
I would say yes, but I know that it's not being leveraged completely, even throughout like the industry or within teams that are using the tool, because it's just a matter of people. But I would say a majority of people who are using the Teamwork or the BIM server are using a majority of the features.
It sounds like you can build a big business just to be a BIM server consultant, like just that aspect.
For
right?
sure. Yeah, because that's one thing that's unique is that once you get into this level of sophistication with leveraging the software, it almost takes it definitely takes a different skill set than what most architecturally trained professionals have within their tool set.
1 more minute, one more question. This one we might dedicate another episode or part of the episode too, but I want to start us off with this. And this is kind of where I'm bumping up against. My partners don't use ArchiCAD. My providers don't use ArchiCAD. There are some architects, that we work with don't use ArchiCAD. And that's why I'm not going to use ArchiCAD. What do you say to that?
I think as I'm getting more seasoned in my career and profession and practice, I can understand that, but I don't agree with it. So I think that unfortunately, it is investment. It is a time kind of thing. There are some, like 20, 30, 40 years worth of evolution that, for somebody who has little desire or experience kind of with parametric technology or just drafting, it could be daunting, but I would suggest that everybody, from the principal all the way down, should be as deep as they can be comfortably within it. And just to in this kind of thing is the practices that I participated in where the principal was fluent in ArchiCAD were the ones that I saw the most efficient leveraging of the tool, as well as the agility to make decisions in a forward movement more quickly. And the projects were better designs, more just a better product in the end.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's all the time we have, folks, as they would say. I think there's more here we can unpack. Let's see if we get any comments, feedback, and more questions. Over time, these episodes just kind of just grow. We'll start out with like 30 views, and they're just like, because people, there's a lot of information data here that is super valuable. So we'll thank you very, very much for taking your time and breaking it down for us. I know you have a lot more to give, but the time is the time. Human civilization requires, other meanings and, substance, like, maybe a donut before next meeting.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Definitely not a donut, a bagel, maybe. Okay. Anyway, thanks a lot. You guys are still watching, listening. Check us out at getarchit.com. We really do IT support for architects, but we could certainly help you think about going from AutoCAD to ArchiCAD. And then if you're actually going, we can help you get there. Right, Willard?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Cheers. Always a pleasure, sir. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you all next time. Cheers.
Cheers.